I'm Robert Ellsberg. I'm the publisher of Orbis Books. Very glad today to be discussing a new book, The Cross and the Olive Tree, Cultivating Palestinian Theology Amid Gaza. The editors are John Munayer and Samuel Munayer, who are brothers who are both raised in and live in Jerusalem. Both of them have studied theology in the United Kingdom. John at the University of Edinburgh, Samuel at the University of Durham. I'd like to quote from the introduction that kind of sets the stage. The contributors to this book have written their chapters as they watch their families being bombed and starved in Gaza. Every word in this book is accompanied by the screams of children, images of destruction, bodies torn by violence, torture, and rape, stirring in us a profound sense of guilt, rooted in our despair and the inability to stop the forces of evil. Truly, the crucified people of Palestine are living the profound mystery of the cross under the weight of the empire. In essence, this book is written during crucifixion and in the expectant hope of resurrection. Well, I want to thank you both, John, Samuel, for joining me, and ask first how you and your families are doing this time.
Our families are relatively okay, given the situation and compared to many families obviously in Gaza and in other areas in the West Bank. So in that sense, our families are relatively fine.
Well, I wonder if contributing to this book has put you and your contributors in any kind of danger.
It's hard to know. We did write the book with some sort of acceptance of a risk to be taken, whether it be arrest, whether it be smear campaigns or some form of slander against us. It might be the case in the future, but as of now, we have not seen or heard of any form of attempts to get us in trouble. But we do know the risks that involve in publicly writing about Palestine and calling out the injustices and trying to articulate a theology that is liberative.
Well, I noticed that the foreword to the book is co-authored by Naim Atik, a Palestinian Anglican priest and theologian. 36 years ago, we published his landmark book, Justice and Only Justice, a Palestinian Theology of Liberation. And I realized that many of the contributors were perhaps not even born when that book was written. And that's, on the one hand, Palestinian liberation theology has flourished, but the situation, the question of liberation is more fraught than ever, really. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about the kind of essential features of Palestinian theology or liberation theology and how that has changed perhaps over the last generation.
Naim and also Cedar paved a way for us younger generations, and their books and material and work still remain extremely relevant to today. So Justice and Only Justice was published in '89, but we still use Justice and Only Justice as a seminal work to articulate the Palestinian theology. And as Cedar Da'bis wrote in her work as well, and their collaborative work also at Sabil, is that the Palestinian theologians in their time were dealing with the faith Nakba in 1948. So both of them were young children when the events of the Nakba happened. And they were in an educational system and in an environment that was heavily influenced by Western colonial theology and namely Christian Zionism, but beyond that as well. And they helped Palestinians really liberate the Bible from the colonial uses and justifications for the oppressions of the Palestinians. And I think their work has been seminal and extremely relevant and important to this day. But the younger generation are exposed to a different kind of audience, a different kind of set of questions, still connected, but also different in many different ways. Whether it's engaging with other liberation theologies around the world, whether it is engaging in different questions, targeting different audiences. And in that way, the contributors in the book and others as well beyond this book are doing Palestinian theology in new ways and exploring new theological terrain. And in the book, we kind of use the analogy of olive oil, and we say, it's doing new recipes of olive oil and theology that is still connected to the old ones. And that's why it was important for Cedar and Ain to be writing the forward so that we show that there's a continuation, a lineage within the tradition of Palestinian theology.
The reference to the olive tree in the title and what you've just said is very significant in the book. And I was particularly struck by your quotation of a Palestinian theologian who says, Palestinian theology is like the olive tree, rooted in drought and stone, yet it endures. It lives for generations, growing steadfast. Even when its branches are cut, new life emerges. Well, you've already referred to that the great question of confronting what you call the weaponization of the Bible and colonial kind of reading of biblical texts that justify occupation and displacement of Palestinian people. How do the seminal liberation Palestinian theologians and you address that kind of problem?
So a lot of the core theologians within the Palestinian tradition have done a brilliant job in challenging these hermeneutical misusages of the Bible to justify the colonial project of Palestinian land. And they've done a brilliant job at that. And I think where perhaps some of the contemporary and new emerging Palestinian theologians, who some of them are in this book, are trying to tackle something that perhaps might be slightly deeper than just Christian Zionism. So if the tree sort of survives very specific episodes of drought, perhaps what we're trying to do is also tackle the sort of the more general climate that is creating these forms of drought, if I can use that sort of analogy. That is to say is that we see Christian Zionism as a problem, but we see Western Christianity as a whole as a problem, whether it's articulated in more Zionist terms or even in Zionist progressive terms that we also find in progressive movements. But it's sort of at the heart of many Western Christian identities. So that's one extra sort of difference between what some of our theological elders have worked on and what we're trying to do.
Well, I'll add very quickly that the question of colonialism is also one within this book that we're trying to decolonize ourselves as well. Yes, we want to target different audiences in the international community. And as John mentioned, our elders have done a brilliant job in critiquing Western theology, but we have also been affected by Western theology. We've also been colonized in our minds. And what Rafiq Khoury, who is quoted about using the olive tree as a symbol for Palestinian theology, is really rooting it within our own indigeneity, within the land itself. So centering it on the Palestinian experience and narrative. Moreover, just to use the illustration of the olive tree, sometimes the olive tree needs pruning. And in that sense, we want to, as well as pick the olives and make olive oil, but also sometimes some branches need to be cut and pruned for the olive tree to be healthy. And that is kind of maybe a helpful metaphor to the project of us trying to decolonize ourselves as well as beyond Palestine.
Well, among the developments, that present the current context, one of them is over the last generation, the decline in the numbers of Christians, Palestinian Christians in Palestine, I was struck to read that Palestinian Christians now make up less than 2% of the population in, I guess, both Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. And that in Gaza, the first chapter kind of traces the ancient roots of Christianity, go all the way back to the New Testament in Gaza, that there are fewer than 650 Christians remaining in Gaza. So that is one context in doing theology today. The other is, as you say in the title, the question of Gaza and genocide, and the question that many of the contributors ask is, where is God in this, and how do you do theology in the face of genocide? Wonder if you comment or any reflections on any of those kind of issues.
Yeah, it's precisely. I mean, the book title is also sort of a nod or a wink towards James Cone's work, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, also published by Orbis, and it's sort of confronting the deep evil of both the lynching tree, but also the genocide in Gaza. We're trying to ask questions of how do we, as Christians, respond to this deep sense of evil and reality that is in front of us, and therefore we're trying to speak to the movement, those specifically Christians who are trying to see a free and just reality in Palestine. So we're not even trying to address the Christian Zionists, where a lot of our books have tried to sort of provide a hermeneutical alternative to their readings. Here we're speaking to those who don't know what to do, or are facing difficult questions of where do I stay in Palestine, like those 600 and now it's around 640 Palestinian Christians in Gaza, or do I try and leave? So we're trying to really focus on the movement itself within the book, and I think that's why it's so crucial for us to really engage in genocide face on.
That reference to James Cone's book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, obviously came to my mind. We published that as well, and especially when you say that, the cross as a symbol of the Christian mystery, the olive tree symbolizing Palestine, how they interpret each other, shedding light on the other's reality, and that was, very much in James Cone's mind, that without the lynching tree reference, the cross can become sentimentalized and just kind of decoration or something. But the cross also, the lynching tree without the cross does not kind of offer that promise of resurrection or the hope that new life that comes despite or is stronger than death. And I thought that the reference to Black liberation theology was interesting to me, because I saw how many of the contributors actually reflect on Palestinian situation in reference to other examples, particularly the genocide in Guatemala, the experience of North American indigenous people, and the theology that's come out of that. In your essay on martyrdom, you refer a lot to John Sobrino, who is writing in that situation of kind of pervasive violence and death. So it did seem as if there was a broader kind of conversation that you're engaging in and entering into dialogue with many other sources.
Yes, I think in many ways this book represents a new moment in time within Palestinian theology, which is a reorientation of the audience and the questions themselves. And this book is perhaps unique in the fact that we are not targeting Western Christians to re-examine their relationship to Christian Zionism, but we're rather engaging with other liberation theologies that have attempted to answer questions that we ourselves have asked ourselves during this genocide. So Sobrino has been extremely important in Latin American liberation theology in general with that question of martyrdom. James Cone and the critics of James Cone as well, womanist theology is also heavily referenced in the book, has helped us cultivate imagination trying to reimagine a sort of alternative reality and where theology can be something contributive to that. And the spirit of the book is, and we quote the words of Job, I have heard your name, but now I see your face.
Mm.
And in that kind of quote, in that spirit, we don't find many of the answers that we're looking for within our critiques of Christian Zionism, but actually with engagement with other oppressed people and other theologies. So it's a reorientation of who our target audience is, and therefore what kind of theological imagination we are able to cultivate with the vast materials that the world has, whether it's in Guatemala, indigenous people in North America, in Latin America, and within Palestine itself.
Yeah, there was one of the chapters deals specifically with Dolores Williams and her womanist classic Sisters in the Wilderness, where she draws on the image of Hagar in the wilderness with Ishmael, who and uh, and feels that she has been seen by God, that her sufferings are seen by God, and her cries are heard by God, and that also that she feels that she has seen God as well in that kind of divine mercy and attention to those who are suffering. Um, I was struck by like one of the well, there was a chapter that dealt a lot with hope and imagination, and I have of course hope is not just optimism, but I'd never seen hope connected to imagination in that way, as another kind of way of talking about that, as something that is transformative, liberative, rooted in struggle, that is a catalyst, a staging ground for action. And he talks about imagination as the bridge between already here and not yet, a bridge between God's promise of restoration and our lived realities of darkness. Um, a glimpse of the future in the present, and challenge to act accordingly. Um, I thought that was a really interesting contribution, one I hadn't seen put in those terms before.
So Lama Mansour, it's a she. Um,
Excuse me.
she writes brilliantly that within that imagination, which is rooted in a sort of lament, a lament of calling to God, why is the world the way it is? It should be differently. Um, really exposes how empires and colonialism tries to limit the imagination of a community, of an individual.
Mhm.
And the idea of a resurrected Christ to the disciples was something that they could not imagine. They had a certain idea of what hope and liberation might look like within the language of empires and power, but not within the language of the slain lamb, the image in Revelation or the resurrected Christ. And in that sense, that form of imagination, that importance of breaking out of this imperial domination towards our own minds actually can be an important catalyst for praxis within the now, and how to deal also with the weight of a genocide where most people are fatalistic or hopeless, but actually equip you with a certain lens, a certain hermeneutic, which allows you to be extremely practical, but also one that envisions a sort of redemptive future.
Mm.
And in that sense, Christ as a model, the resurrection of Christ is also a renewal of our imagination.
Mm.
I think it's incredibly important in these dark times that we cling on to that imagination and allow us to retain our humanity and believe in something and work for something that is not yet here, but affects our day-to-day life. And
Mm.
in that sense, Lama is incredibly important in our theology in cultivating a language about hope that is not kind of whitewashed or
Mm.
superficial.
I I loved it where she said, to imagine an alternative future is to assert that another way of being is not only possible, but necessary. It's a form of theological resistance. A couple of the authors use the same word, glimpses, really struck me uh, as not just signs, but we don't necessarily see that alternative future clearly, but there are glimpses of it, glimpses of the divine, glimpses of liberation, glimpses of the future, and that is something to kind of stake your hope on, your action on, your perseverance, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the many of the authors are writing under very, very difficult conditions, and I think many of us have sort of been able to approach the Bible and Scripture in a very different way since the genocide. It's almost as if certain areas of the Bible have become either more personal, or there's certain elements that are illuminated thanks. And thanks is a weird word here, thanks to the genocide itself, right? Because we're living under such horrible conditions. When we read the Christmas story, for instance, it hits us in a different way when we hear about Herod killing the 3,000 children, and the story of Mary and Joseph essentially being refugees. This is something that we relate to in a very, very different manner. So we can relate to the Christmas story, for instance, since we're also approaching it soon, in a way that perhaps Christmas is not for everyone. It's not for the powerful and the rich to fully grasp in its full meaning. So I think a lot of the authors had these moments of sort of seeing these glimpses of hope or of power. And thankfully, this was a collective project. So we brought everyone together. We brought Reverend Naim and Auntie Cedar to also kind of bless the project itself, and also to help us through this, since they know more than us what it's like to live so many years and to see the situation slowly deteriorate. But at the same time, they were the most encouraging sort of elders in our community for this project.
Let's talk a little bit about your last chapter that you wrote together on the theology of martyrdom. And I was very struck that you don't focus so much on the common kind of meaning or association of martyrdom with death, but with the original Greek meaning of witness, and that becomes the kind of theme of your chapter. Tell me a little bit about your thinking there.
So I'll just start by saying that the topic itself is a very hard topic to engage with, martyrdom. And this is one that really we had to engage with because we have martyrs who have been killed in the church, it was the 2 years since the bombing of the Greek Orthodox Church about 3 weeks ago. Or some of our communities have asked the question, do we stay or do we go? Do we face the consequences? And therefore we felt like me and Sam had to address this seriously. So we started looking into both scripture, but also our tradition to try and understand how should we approach this topic. And when you look at the Greek, but it's also true for Arabic, the word martyr is to be a witness. And therefore, when we engage with this idea of we being Christians, we're witnesses. And this is a very legal language that is being used in the New Testament. And then the question is, who is on trial? Who are you being a witness for? Who is the judge? So on and so forth. And we felt that, and as we engage with scripture and the tradition, that being a witness is more than, or being a martyr is more than just one paying a price by death, but actually it's much wider than that. And when you are trying to be faithful to the teachings of Jesus, you oftentimes oppose the empire, and the empire will crack down on you. And therefore you might lose a job, or you'll suffer economically, socially. I think social exclusion is a big one when it comes to opposing the powers of our time, right? How many of us have had to break relationships from either friends or loved ones? And also to look at our tradition, and when a witness or martyr is one who A, does it in community, but B, sometimes suffers because of one's actions and not always one's beliefs. And how for the early church, being a Christian necessarily meant that you opposed the Roman Empire. But unfortunately today, when people say that they're a Christian, that usually means that they align with the empire, or at least the American empire. So these are some areas we kind of wanted to engage with in terms of broadening the understanding of a witness, a martyr, and also looking at the ways people are martyred for.
Well, certainly the theme of the cross and resurrection underlie the book as a whole. And I wonder, not just theologically, but practically, where do you see glimpses of resurrection today?
It's every time someone asks that question, it's very hard to answer, because it's very difficult to see the glimpses of the resurrection, and I believe John and I use the metaphor of Holy Saturday to kind of explain the times that we're in right now. So it's people either stay in Good Friday, where Christ was crucified, or jump from Good Friday to Easter Sunday, overlooking the cross. And I think where we are right now is in Holy Saturday, silent, dark. And in the morning, actually, like Mary Magdalene did, who brought oils to bless and mourn the body of Christ, I think is where we are currently at, and where actually is the foretales, or is before the events where Christ is revealed to Mary Magdalene as a gardener. And I think in that morning that you can see the globe having is where you see perhaps glimpses of that resurrection, where people are mourning what is happening in the crucified people of today in Gaza and the genocide, and are in tears waiting to see that kind of resurrection. So I think that's one aspect that I would answer that question. I know it doesn't answer directly, but a more direct answer is I see resurrection within the people of Palestine who are uh, holding on to their humanity, even though it's denied so terribly. Within people who are nurses and journalists who are risking their lives for principles that outlast empires, which is truth and justice and dignity. I see resurrection within the children, the next generation, who are laughing and are believing that there's a future that is worth living for. I see that in the people, and I also see the crucifixion in them at the same time. So it's that kind of in between crucifixion and resurrection where I see glimpses. But I believe that the resurrection is something very difficult to discern, where it is that kind of olive shoots of resurrection are sometimes very difficult to discern where they are, and they can only be discerned if we enter into that long, silent Holy Saturday.
Well, I'm really struck, as you say, we're approaching the time of Christmas, and to consider that this story of the cross and resurrection is occurring in the very land where Jesus walked and lived and died and was resurrected. And I'm really grateful to you for your courage and deep faith in compiling this book and what you've shared with us today. You say we expect to see our situation deteriorate and do not know what the future holds, you say in the introduction. And we will be holding you very much in our hearts and our prayers, and all the people of Palestine. And and I hope that people will really read and reflect on this book, The Cross and the Olive Tree: Cultivating Palestinian Theology Amid Gaza. I found it very moving, inspiring, and ultimately really hopeful book. It made me imagine that a different future is possible. And thank you very much for all you've done to contribute to that.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, and also for all the work that Orbis is involved with. Orbis's books have been so influential on our lives, so it's an honor to be a part of this project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's truly an honor, and we've benefited so much from Orbis as well in the process of writing the book with the different people involved, and being a part of a publication like Orbis, I think it speaks to from Naima Atiq's Justice and Only Justice to James Cone, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, to Gustavo Gutierrez on Job and Dolores Williams. To be a part of that kind of legacy of Orbis is truly humbling, and we hope that these books and these writings inspire people for new imaginations and for continued resistance.
Thank you. Well, both of you, I hope you stay safe and keep the faith. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.